Now on BBC One, See Here looks at how family history can predict deafness.
Hello, I'm Sandra Smith. Welcome to the beautiful Gloucestershire village of Bisley. Now you may well think that a graveyard is a peculiar place to start a television programme, but I do have my reasons. According to family tradition, Bisley is where my branch of the Smiths originated. But that's not all. They say it's also where the first deaf Smith was born. I've always wondered what he was like, who he was, and how many there've been since. Could it be this man, Thomas Smith? Now he died in 1798, so that means it would be 6, 7, or even 8 generations ago. How can I find out whether this man was one of my ancestors, and whether he was deaf or hearing? My family provided me with lots of information about my ancestors, and that's been an important starting point for researching my family tree.
(1928 or 1929).
So that then was Thomas Walter.
That was the grandfather.
Sam.
Ah, Sam.
That's it. Your father. Wow.
Then I told you, that's what I thought.
This here is my grandmother, and I think it is her sister.
Sister.
This is the Smiths.
Sister.
And I think that this is my father.
Your father, right.
You're Fred Turner's daughter, are you?
I'm
Fred Turner's
Yes.
daughter?
Yes.
What, Fred from Cheltenham?
Cheltenham, that's right.
Oh, I didn't know we had a brother. Yeah.
Where are you from now?
We live in Gloucester.
We're in Gloucester now, yeah.
No, it's Cambridgeshire.
Somebody was telling me Sandra Smith. I said, who? They said, your daughter.
Now, I couldn't have chosen a worse name to research than Smith, the most common surname in Britain. But why Smith? My maiden name is Hopkins, so why not look into that? Or even Treby, Mum's name. Well, it was her fault. She persuaded me to follow the Smith line, because Graham and I are both descended from the same Smith. OK, everybody, Look, it's time to come through and eat. And we also want to wish Mum a happy birthday. As all 4 children from my marriage to Graham Smith are also deaf, it's possibly a genetic deafness. It could be in my mother's family, the Treebys, in my father's, the Hopkins, or in Graham's line, the Smiths. As you can see from this chart, I have a rough idea of my family tree just from talking to my relations. Oh, thanks. Ah, now this is your grandparents' marriage certificate. Do you remember I was telling you that she got married at the same time as her sister? Do you remember? There they are. Now you be good while I'm away, okay? Promise to be good? Hi, have you got the books? I'm hoping to see some original material. Now this is interesting. Charles Walter Smith, my great uncle. He says here he was learning to become a bookbinder, an apprentice for the firm Norman Sawyer. In a letter they wrote, it says, Charles has worked well. And the evidence of that was the fact that the company had said they'd expected Charles to need intense supervision, and so charged £10 for his indenture. However, after just 1 month's trial, that fee was reduced. £10 then is equivalent to about £500 today. A lot of money. Now, I have a newspaper cutting at home showing that he stayed with that same firm for 60.5 years. Amazing. Now, this book proves that all 4 children did go to this school. And in this one, it states that Charles Walter's sister, Maria Smith, was learning to be a dressmaker. It says that her employer was very pleased with her work. She was deemed to be a good girl with definite future potential in that business. The certificates I've collected show that Maria had a child 5 years before she got married. Now, I've no evidence yet to show if she was married twice or who the father was, and nobody mentioned that when they were telling me about our family history. The first place to go for information and evidence is St. Catherine's House. Now, this is where they keep records of births, marriages and deaths going back to 1837. You should go in there sometime. It's like a beehive. There's all sorts of people from different backgrounds researching their own family history. There's a whole mile of shelving holding indexes to all the births, marriages and deaths. Now, I've been doing this for quite some time, so I've collected lots of certificates. There they are. Looking at all the certificates I had, I knew I was going to have to focus on Thomas Walter Smith, because Graham and myself are both related to him. Look at this. I have the certificate of his marriage. He was married to Mary Adelaide on December the 26th, 1881. It also shows their jobs, where they lived, their fathers' names and their jobs. Age too. Now, age is important because knowing that meant that I could get his birth certificate. From this, I know his mother's name, which means I can find his parents' marriage certificate. Here it is. It's laid out the same. And from that, I can get his father's name. So that's basically how to go back through the generations, via births and marriages. Here's Thomas Walter, married to Mary. His father was called Thomas Smith. He was married to Emma. And his father was another Thomas Smith, who I think came from Bisley. The problem is I don't have the grandmother's name. If I had that, then maybe I could link it to the grave in Bisley Cemetery. The difficulty is linking these two together. The problem is, of course, the dates. The records at St. Catherine's only go back as far as 1837, so I can't find his date of birth from there. That means using another source. I'm here at another most important place. In this building is the International Genealogical Index, the IGI for short. If you do have information like names, dates and places, then it's worthwhile coming here because it will save you a great deal of time and money. What sort of details can the IGI give me?
Well, it doesn't give you burial or death information, but it is very helpful. It can give you christening information and marriages. But of course it gives you the place and the county. It's very useful. It's a very quick way of finding information on your ancestors.
Why is the Mormon Church gathering all this information?
Well, this information has been gathered for many years. The church actually goes and microfilms original parish registers and other documents, such as census records and that type of thing. And the information is gathered and put onto microfilm so we can get access to it. And we do it because we're interested in our families. Families are important to us. And this information helps us to gather information so that we can get the details of our ancestors.
How far back do the records go?
Well, there are a few records before 1500, but it was in 1538 that Thomas Cromwell wanted the churches in this land to start keeping parish records. And they recorded things such as baptisms, marriages and burials. And then it was in 1837 that the state records were kept under the direction of Queen Victoria. She wanted records kept on births, marriages and deaths. Now our IGI goes up to 1876, and that's for privacy reasons. Let me show you what the IGI can do for you. British Isles, an individual search. What is the name you want?
Thomas Smith.
Smith. And the year?
1824.
Computer searches through the disk, so we have all the Thomas Smiths will be together. The county is Gloucestershire.
Yeah.
Gloucestershire. Thomas Smith, 1824, Gloucestershire. That's when he was christened. Thomas Smith, mother was Charlotte. And that's the christening date in the Wesleyan Nonconformist Church in Stroud in Gloucestershire.
I'm really not sure. I don't know. Is it possible to get a printout of this?
Yes, we can make a printout for you.
Where did the original documents for this come from?
If you want to actually see these original records, they'd be in the Gloucester Record Office, and I'm sure they'll be only too pleased to show you.
A third important source is parish records. They've been moved here for safekeeping from churches all over Gloucestershire, and they date back to 1538, so that means another 300 years. The people working here are local historians and archivists, and they all have a wealth of local knowledge, which is going to be really useful. But first, the census returns. In this small box is a microfilm copy of the census returns for part of Cheltenham from 1851. I remember the first time I held this. I was nervous yet excited. I was hoping that there would be records of my ancestors and evidence of their deafness. I know my great-grandfather was Thomas Walter Smith, and he would be about 2 years old on this. It's just finding him. Well, this shows he was deaf. The first time I saw this, it was such a thrill for me, seeing he was deaf. And there's his father, Thomas Smith, who worked as a shoemaker. Is this Thomas Smith connected to the Thomas Smith that I've seen in the graveyard at Bisley? That's really what I need to know.
It's very difficult to say. You've sent us a lot of background information, and we've tried to do some research on this before you came. We do have this marriage here of Thomas Smith and Anne Holder in 1807, which you can see here. And so we think that that may be related to the family. And we also have here the burial of Harriet, who may have been a sister of the Thomas Smith that you're concerned with. And of course, very much earlier on, we have another Thomas Smith in Bisley who was buried in 1798 at the age of 80. So there are possibilities that this might be your family, but the other records that you need, particularly the record of the baptism of your Thomas Smith, for example, and the elder Thomas Smith, those are going to be in the chapel records, possibly of Chalford Baptist Chapel, and those records don't survive.
Without the evidence from Chalford Baptist Church, which has been lost, it's difficult to know for certain that the Thomas Smith who married Anne is the Thomas Smith that I'm looking for. The interesting thing is, I've managed to trace back 170 years to the first deaf Thomas Smith, and I've identified over 100 descendants. Now look at this. From the beginning, all the names in blue signify those who are hearing, and the names in red are those who are deaf. There's more than you'd normally expect. Almost half of these are deaf. Off you go. Of course, this couldn't be the gravestone of the Thomas Smith I've been looking for. I've got here a marriage certificate. It's for the younger Thomas Smith. And it shows his father, the second Thomas Smith. Could this be the grandfather? The third Thomas Smith? Who knows? The 1851 census proved that the younger Thomas Smith was deaf. As an unusually high number of his descendants, including my first 4 children, are deaf, you could say that that's their heritage from him. My 5th child is hearing. Come on. So, the question is, will my grandchildren be deaf or hearing? Just have to wait and see.